Hi, students, welcome to video 23 on water pollution. So after the video, you should be able to list and describe different water pollutants. You should also be able to explain how those pollutants are entering our water. And you should be able to distinguish between a point and non-point source pollutant, which is not something new. You should really already be able to do that. So what is water pollution? Basically, anything that can be added to the water that changes the water quality in some way. It makes the water unsuitable for us to drink, for us to swim in, whatever it might be. So around the world, and specifically in the United States, there are 3.4 million premature deaths per year that happen because of bacterial or whatever it is that's in your water. Almost 2 million of those deaths are from diarrhea. Basically, you drink water, it has some sort of bacteria in it, you get sick, and it causes you to lose basically all your water. Then you drink water that probably is also still polluted because that's what you were drinking beforehand, and you can never kind of get that water back in your system. So here in the United States, there's about 1.5 million illnesses every year because of water pollution related illnesses, and is the single largest cause of illness across the world. So this chart, I really encourage you to print these charts off. There's this one and one more coming up. You can go online. The PowerPoints are there. This is a lot of stuff to write, and it's better that you just kind of annotate the graph as you go through. So we're going to look at the major water pollutants and kind of where they come from. So the first one is infectious agents. These are pathogens, things like bacteria, viruses, parasites, mainly going to be coming from human and animal wastes. We also have oxygen demanding waste, also coming from human and animal waste, from like sewage and things like that. And these are things that get into the water that cause bacteria to decompose those wastes. The reason we call it oxygen demanding is because that process requires oxygen, just like when we talked about eutrophication. And so the oxygen demanding waste are those things that are causing the bacteria to be using up the oxygen in the water. Plant nutrients are also things that cause plants to grow. So nitrates and phosphates, mainly coming from those wastes again, sewage, animal waste, fertilizers, and that is what causes the eutrophication process. Organic chemicals are things that come from actual or once living organisms. So things like oil, gas, plastics, which comes from oil. Mainly these are going to be used in industry and households and farms. Then you have your inorganic chemicals, kind of like your household cleaners, you might think, things like acids, bases, salts. Your sediment is going to be coming from things like construction sites. So it's all going to be land erosion processes, soil and silt. Heavy metals like lead, mercury, and arsenic, mainly coming from industries, and also household chemicals, things that we wash down the drain. And then thermal pollution is just simply heat, raising the temperature of the water, which can then cause some other issues. And these are going to come from electric power and industrial plants. So looking a little bit more closely at the diseases that are transmitted to humans, bacterial diseases can be things like typhoid fever, cholera, dysentery, at least the bacterial kind. And you'll notice that most of the effects are dealing with things like diarrhea, vomiting, intestinal pain, stomach pain, nausea, all that kind of stuff. When you go down to the viruses, you have things like hepatitis B. These are going to be things that cause also all those problems that you see with bacterial infections a lot of times, but also you see fever and headaches and kind of more brain issues with viruses than you do with bacteria. You have parasites, both protozoa and worms. Parasitic protozoa are going to be things like amoebas, so they can also cause dysentery. Cryptosporidium is how you say that word down here. Again, with the diarrhea, the cramping, all of these things can possibly cause death for people that have weak immune systems already, and it can cause you to get something else as well because it weakens your immune system. And then parasites like schistosomiasis, again with the abdominal pain, but now you're looking at anemia, becoming anemic, having less iron in your blood, and just basically general ill health from all of these different water pollutants. So again, with the sources, what we saw before, most of the sources are agriculture, industry, and mining. So agriculture would be things like sediment, pesticides, bacteria from livestock. Industries are toxins related to heavy metals going out into the water, heat and oil, and mining again, toxins, acid mine drainage, sediment pollution from all the mining activities. So if you don't remember point versus non-point, we talked about it in Unit 1. A point source is something that I can specifically say, yes, this is the source of the pollutant. So it's going to be something like a industrial drain or pipe or sewage treatment plant. I can kind of point to it, and it's that one thing. A non-point source pollutant is basically all types of runoff that you can imagine. So in the picture, you see city streets, you see rural homes, you see croplands. All of those are going to be non-point because I cannot specifically attribute that pollution to a single source. So, what are some solutions to these point and non-point sources? For non-point sources, we can try to reduce runoff. So, if you don't have as many paved areas in your area, if you have more places where rain can soak into the ground, you're not going to have so much runoff. If you can't do that, you can have buffer zones near streams. So, make it illegal to build a house right beside a stream because you know you're going to have more runoff there. You can do things like soil conservation methods, crop rotation, terracing, alley cropping. If you remember those from Unit 4, and that only, or you can also do IPM methods where you're only applying pesticides as needed. Some point source solutions, they're a little bit more difficult to employ. It does have to be a regulation usually. So before 1988, basically all industry was allowed to dump their waste into the ocean. So the Ocean Dumping Ban Act stopped them from being able to do that, which was kind of an important thing. In 1974, we had the Safe Water Drinking Act, which made the EPA able to monitor the pollutants that were known to affect human health. So they established kind of like high levels of contamination, what is an acceptable level of contamination in the water. In 1977, we had the Clean Water Act, which was really important. This was not the first time we had the Clean Water Act, but it kind of is the one that added the sewage treatment plants. And so that was where we were sending our sewage not to, oceans and things like that and dumping it out in rivers. We were putting it in a sewage treatment facility and then dumping it in the river. But still, with that happening, almost a fifth of Americans are drinking water that came from a treatment plant that had some sort of safety violation within the last year. So even though these things are awesome and great and it has caused improvements, there are still some areas where, it's not foolproof. So there are some natural threats that happen also. Bacteria can be naturally occurring in the water, but other things like arsenic can also be. So the arsenic is a heavy metal. Just like all heavy metals, it causes terrible neurological diseases and can lead to things like cancer, brain disease, heart disease. And arsenic is naturally occurring in soil and rocks. And since that's where our water is, it can get in the water as well naturally. We also cause it to kind of leach out into the water when we drill into aquifers. And so that can kind of add more to this threat. So specific to North Carolina, we have lots of hog farms in North Carolina, and pigs come with lots of waste. North Carolina is the second largest producer of hogs in the United States, Iowa being the first. So we talk about this a little bit just because there's so many pigs in our state. So looking at pigs, the biggest issue with pigs is their waste. So we have lagoons. That's where all of the waste goes when you have these confined feedlots. In this picture right here is this water area. It looks like a pond, but it's really a poop pond. So in 1995, this lagoon failed, and it spilled out 250 million gallons of pig feces in the New River in Jacksonville area. And so it took 3 months for this place to recover. The stream eventually will clean itself. But for a very long time, you had lots of bacteria in the water and it made lots and lots of people sick. Similarly, we have hurricanes in North Carolina. This one specifically was in 1999. This is called actually the Bay of Pigs in North Carolina because there were so many pigs that ended up dying. They drowned, and you can see them trying to get somewhere safe here. So the pig bodies themselves causes lots of pollution issues from disease, but you can see the lagoons up here were basically flooded, and then you see this hog waste going out into the stream. Looking real closely for a second at fecal coliform because it is one of the most pervasive ones. You hear of E. coli outbreaks all the time. It seems like Chipotle is having an outbreak every year. So E. coli is a fecal coliform bacteria. We use fecal coliform as a standard to measure the disease potential of our water. So kind of we look at that and we say how safe is the water. So for swimming, you can have up to 200 cells for every 100 milliliters of water. For drinking, you can't have any, not even one cell. One cell of E. coli can cause you to have the entire bacterial disease. Most of the time, this comes from sewage treatment facility or runoff from a pig farm or cow farm. This is often what you hear about when you hear about water parks having diseases and people got sick because they went to the water park. Sometimes people die, and it results in cramps and vomiting and diarrhea. It can result in death. Okay, so bring your questions tomorrow to class.